This is Good Morning Nigeria, and as a prompt for our conversation this morning on the anti-corruption crusade, let's take this background report put together by Joseph Hussein.
The anti-corruption war has been one of the cardinal plans of the present administration since it assumed office in 2015. To the president, corruption will kill Nigeria if Nigeria does not kill corruption. This is a call to all citizens to stand firm and embrace the government's efforts to nip the devil in the bud. Sensitization has been on, and the anti-graft agencies are also busy to save the country from the shackles of corruption. As the war surged on, the federal government has recovered funds from corporate bodies and individuals with top personalities jailed and assets recovered. Former governors who bagged jail terms include Jody Nyame of Taraba State, 14 years, Joshua Dare of Plateau State, 10 years, former Abia State Governor Orji Uzor Kalu, 12 years, but the Supreme Court will later nullify his conviction. Another is James Bala, former governor of Adamawa State, jailed for 5 years. The sentence of Abdul Rashid Mena, the former chairman of the now defunct Pension Reform Tax Team, 8 years imprisonment for money laundering, and that of his son are among high-profile cases still fresh in the minds of many. Latest reports from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission indicates that the Commission secured an unprecedented 2,220 convictions across all its commands in 2021, the highest by the EFCC since inception, surpassing that of 2019 record of 1,280 convictions. The Commission also says it recovered over 152 billion naira from looters between January and December last year alone. Similarly, the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission (ICPC) records shows that it has been able to prevent the sum of 189 billion naira from being diverted under personal cost by NDAs between 2018 to 2020. The successes recorded by Nigeria in national and international asset recovery, the government hinged on legislative framework, establishment of institutions, and policy measures targeted at combating corruption, regional cooperation, and ensuring good governance for the benefit of citizens. But is corruption slowing down, and is the nation really winning the war? These are critical questions that have remained on the minds of many as the nation's economy continues to struggle. Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will analyze the anti-corruption war of the present administration and attempt to provide answers to these questions.
Many thanks, Joseph Olsen, for that backgrounder. Now, joining us to discuss issues around the anti-corruption war, let's welcome via Zoom Professor Sadiq Rada. Professor Sadiq Rada is the Executive Secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC. Professor Rada, delighted to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, and also part of the conversation this morning is Mrs. Nwunye Ogugwa, who is spokesperson of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Related Offences Commission, ICPC. Mrs. Ogugwa, pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you, Kingsley.
It's rather Mrs.
Azuka Ogugwa.
Ogugwa. Nwunye in Igbo means wife. Right, so
Nwunye means wife.
So it's not necessarily a name.
Oh.
But I know she may have used that on some platforms. That's why it was lifted. So it's Mrs. Ogugwa.
So if Nwunye is wife in Igbo, what is husband?
Husband?
D.
Ndi.
Oh, that's just by the way. That's just by the way. All right. From Benin, we have Reverend David Ugolo, Executive Director of the African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, ANEJ. You are welcome to the program, sir.
Nigerians, thanks.
We can cannot discuss issues concerning corruption without involving the EFCC. So by 8 o'clock, we hope that the chairman of that commission will be joining us via Zoom, Kingsley.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kirian. Let's begin with Professor Rada. Professor Rada, Executive Secretary of PACAC. Give us your assessment of the fight against corruption. Are we slowing down, or we have just reached a point of ennui, if you like?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, Nigeria. I want to thank you for this opportunity. You can take it to the bank that as far as this government is concerned, there is no alternative to fighting corruption. This is because if you want to improve the security of the country and you want to improve the economy of the country, you cannot do that without fighting corruption. Corruption will devastate the nation such that the economy will not be functional. The security architecture will not be able to provide the much needed security. Therefore, there is no slowing down. As you can see, the fight against corruption, as far as the president is concerned, is a top priority. Top priority because Nigeria needs to ensure that services are provided to the citizens. And to provide services to the citizens, you have to ensure that ministries, departments, and agencies of government and all the public servants perform their duties diligently, sincerely, and honestly. So, for me, there is no going back in the fight against corruption. For this government, there is no going back in the fight against corruption. And as you can see, our anti-corruption agencies, ICPC, EFCC, Code of Conduct Bureau, NFIU, and all our regulatory bodies are doing their best to ensure that ministries, departments, and agencies of government perform their duties so that services can be rendered to the citizens. Therefore, there is no going back. And recent evidence has shown that there is more commitment to the fight against corruption by EFCC, by ICPC. Therefore, there is no relenting in the fight against corruption in Nigeria.
All right, let's stay with you for a while. Some have raised their concerns, about the methods used by the country's anti-graft agencies, in tackling, the fight against corruption. What would you say about the methods that they deploy presently?
Well, they are operating under the law, so I don't see anything wrong in the manner of their operations. The only thing is they have now become even more professional by conducting more thorough investigation. If you monitor what the ICPC is doing regarding arrests, prosecutions, convictions, there are a lot of technical things that are being done before the arrest. If you look at what the EFCC is doing, they are professional, they are technical, and they do a lot of groundwork prior to letting Nigerians deserve to know what is going on. So I am happy with the EFCC, ICPC, Code of Conduct Bureau, NFIU, because they operate within the ambit of the law, and Nigerians need to know what is going on. Without publishing their work, without showcasing what has been done, possibility is people would think nothing is going on. And again, the flip side of it is that if things are not brought out to the attention of Nigerians, possibility is some people will indulge in it. Therefore, if you do your work within the ambit of the law, then Nigerians need to know so that at least everybody can take caution. So the methodology, I'm not saying it's perfect, but then it's very, very good because it is done professionally, it is done technically, it is done with expertise and commitment. So we commend all these anti-corruption agencies.
Yes, you talked about some level of imperfection, in the methods that they apply, because in some cases, some people are arrested in such a manner that they begin to think, look, who are coming in here? Are they armed robbers? The manner and approach, sometimes they say people jump fences, and they swoop into your house as if you are a common criminal, before investigation is carried out. Now you're talking about a review of some of the methods. What are those reviews that you talked about? What are the possibilities of changing gear, with respect to the approach?
Okay, Kirian, we understand there's some interference with the Zoom connection by Professor Rada. If it's been cleared up, we can return to him, but otherwise we'll come back to the studios and get the perspective of Mrs. Nwunye Ogugwu-Azuka to comment on aspects regarding the question that my colleague Kirian posed, namely the methods being adopted by the anti-graft agencies. There have been some complaints about the methods, but are the methods working regardless?
Yes, I believe so. The methods are what we call the 3 S's: the sanctions, the systems, and the society. So this 3-pronged approach has to be balanced. You can't just take one and leave the other. Sanctions speak to the enforcement, and people are arrested, investigated, investigations are carried out, and thereafter they are prosecuted. Nigerians usually complain when, they think proper groundwork was not done, or in these days of social media, some people show maybe a little aggression on the side, but the methods for arrest is just the method for arrest. When people resist arrest, it turns out to be a bit rough. But when it comes to systems, that method cannot be faulted because it's corruption prevention. And it's better to prevent corruption than to start looking for the thieves. So that method brings about systematic and systemic changes that will stop and reduce the corruption from taking place in the first instance. And then, of course, the society is the method of mobilizing the public to own the fight. Because if you leave it for ICPC, EFCC, Code of Conduct alone, then it just means that a few people are just trying to battle and sweep out corruption from all the country. And that might be a very hard task. So we appreciate the importance of civil society like Reverend Golo and other civil society organizations, and even individual citizens identifying with what ICPC is doing. So the methods are almost foolproof. But where people have a challenge is with the enforcement, because they might think it's a bit aggressive.
Method of arrest. Okay, we'll get to the some specifics, with regards to the methods, in the course of the conversation. Right now, we're being joined by the Chairman, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, via Zoom, Abdul Rashid Bawa. Good morning, Chairman, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, we may also like to ask you to also air your view. You are the man in the saddle. It's not been easy. All things being equal, knowing full well that corruption is a systemic thing in Nigeria. And as the president often said, that if you don't fight corruption, corruption will fight you. So how has it been, since you took over office?
Well, so far so good. I think you, the media, have reported quite a number of things that we have done. You know the circumstances that brought the new set of administration in the EFCC in office. We have been working tirelessly to ensure that we have, put in place our internal mechanism and modes of operation in place. We have reviewed certain things here. We have worked on so many things. And then, of course, the government have been supportive 100% in all the things that we have done. And, so far so good, as you said. Of course, it's a daunting task that the problem is systemic and endemic, but I think we are getting there.
All right, Chairman Bauer, you are an insider in the EFCC. In other words, you were appointed chair from within the ranks of the officer cadre of the EFCC. Tell us what your experience was like before you became chairman of EFCC. Of course, your name has been mentioned in a number of cases that have been prosecuted around, say, the Federal High Court in Lagos. What is changing in the fight against corruption?
I think so many things are changing. People, or Nigerians generally, are seeing the fight against corruption as making arrests, and of course, making prosecution. But there are so many things involved. You have the prevention aspect, you have the asset recovery aspect, but we tend to view the enforcement component of it as what it is. And then if you do it this way, they will say, no, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. And then we are in the situation whereby everybody is now an anti-corruption expert, except maybe the chairman of CCB and ICPC and the EFCC. We're trying our best. We have asked so many things in one. You started with a narrative and ended up asking this. But I think by and large, we have understood the problem. As I said, the problem is systemic and endemic, and we're engaging with government generally on how to change some of systems and processes that we have currently in place. And well, it's what it is. God willing, we'll get there. Are we getting there now? Are we getting there next year? But I believe that having understood the problem, we'll get there very soon. I mean, as soon as practicable.
Well, one of the issues that we always had about corruption was what was labeled grand corruption and the impunity that often accompanied it. Persons who were put in charge of the public till had no qualms in self-dealing, helping themselves to public funds. Are we still having such instances of audacity, or is there a climb down from the kind of recklessness that we used to see in the past?
The issue of having a sort of grand corruption, I don't understand what that means, grand corruption. That people at the highest level of government will sit down and more or less share resources. No. There are several opportunities that are available to public servants that they are exploring to ensure that, they are amassing the wealth that ordinarily they shouldn't have. And I think since the coming of the government of President Muhammadu Buhari, he has done so much to ensure that there are systems and processes in place to checkmate, these issues. We have to understand one thing, gentlemen, that naturally a man is greedy, and that there are psychologists will tell you there is criminal tendencies on everybody. And because of that greediness of a man, and because of that criminal tendency of a man, two things will always will have to be in place to enable us to checkmate that. And that is the issue of faith and belief. And the second issue has to do with putting in system and processes in place to checkmate opportunities available that will, push somebody into committing these, fraudulent activities. And I think that is the way to go. If you look at issues or systems that have come on board, issues of DIVMIS, issues of TSA, issues of trying to embrace technology. I was reading, was it yesterday or thereabout, that the Minister of Communication and Digital Economy was quoted to have said that the government last year have spent close to about 52 billion in trying to have a sort of e-governance, structure in place. So, things are being understood in that regard, and I think government is making emphasis on that. We too, on our part, we are advising them, and that is the way to go. We need to have in this country, what I call integrated e-governance, structure, whereby a lot of these loopholes are being blocked, a lot of these processes and procedures are in place to ensure that, yes, even if you want to do it, even if you have the pressure to commit fraud or corruption or whatever, the opportunities are not there for you to do that. I was telling my officers here that we'll get there one day when, if you bribe somebody $1 million, wherever he is, you place his hands on his head and shout that, what am I going to do with this? And then of course that is to show you that, yes, you have system and processes in place to checkmate any of these things, ease of laundering some of these proceeds of crime, etc., etc.
All right, Chairman, the EFCC will return to you in the course of the program. But let's bring in Reverend David Ugolo, Executive Director, the African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, who is joining us from Benin. So let's get your own view, or rather an assessment, your assessment of the graft war in Nigeria. Of course, we have EFCC, we have the ICPC. These are the key agencies, responsible for this fight. What's your assessment of how the two organizations have been able to tackle corruption in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Again, I want to thank the NTA authority for the opportunity to also participate in this conversation that is very important for Nigerians. No doubt, if we were to rely on the Corruption Perception Index and other indicators globally, and then the concerns expressed by Nigerians, one will begin to answer if the anti-corruption agencies are performing to the expectations of Nigerians. But having said that, I want to say that you all know that the election of Buhari was based on his commitment to tackling corruption in the country. And obviously, give it to President Buhari, he has obviously put the issue of anti-corruption on the top agenda since he became president in Nigeria. And at the same time, the Anti-Corruption Agency, EFCC, and ICPC, and others have also been given a lot of publicity because of the great work they are doing. And I always share this with people that because of the awareness level, the access to news in a very swift manner, people hardly could understand whether corruption is being tackled in the country. But at the same time, there are obvious weaknesses in some area that will require to be addressed. And if you looked in overall, the Anti-Corruption Agency, ICPC and EFCC, they've done very well, and particularly in the area of tackling corruptions that within the public sector. They have tried to focus on those, but I also feel that there are areas where they will also require improvement. And if you look at the Corruption Perception Index, the country performance in that index have also shown clearly there are areas that require institutional reform. At the same time, if you also look at the Nigerian rating in the compliance with the UN Anti-Corruption Treaty, which is the UNCAC, United Nations Convention Against Corruption, in the external review carried out in Nigeria, they have also identified areas that Nigeria will require a lot of improvement. And that you also see that you can notice that in the FATF evaluation, which is the Financial Action Task Force evaluation recently carried out on Nigeria. And that again connects with the ease with which politically exposed persons can easily export public resources out of the country. And you will see, you found that this is also traced to the weak financial system in the country. Having said that, the ability for this government, with cooperation with the Anti-Corruption Agency, like EFCC, ICPC, in tackling grand corruptions, in making sure that some of these funds that are already stolen are recovered and returned back to the country, you rate Nigeria number one in the in the entire country fighting to retrieve their recovered asset back to their country. As a participant on the issue, I recall when we were all in Washington attending the Global Forum on Asset Recovery. Nigeria and other 4 countries were invited. Between 2017 and where we are today, Nigeria is the only country that have recovered substantial money back to their country. And so that success, you cannot disconnect the EFCC and the president government from it, and then the Attorney General as well too. So they've done very well, but at the same time, in the areas of asset recovery, the fund recover, for example, the Abuja 1, the Abuja 2, and the Abuja 3. Particularly on the Abuja 2, where we are currently monitoring across the entire country. Nigeria is the first country in the world that has now put recovered asset into social protection program, which is used for cash transfer program in the country. That $321 million that was returned back to Nigeria is currently being disbursed across the entire country. And for me, for that, it's a huge success, and it's a big plus for the anti-corruption campaign in the country. Now, if you look the whole entire public sector corruption, it's difficult for you to assess that this government have done very well, particularly in the areas of MDAs, how they have managed the budget fund, and also to the transparency around the COVID fund. Those are issues that continue to bother Nigerians, and you will agree with me that they need to improve on those areas. And the Anti-Corruption Agency need to develop new tools on how to tackle those new recent corruptions happening in those areas. Then if you look also to the extractive sector, which is the major source of the income of the country, which is the oil, you will agree with me that the Nigerian Extractive Transparency Initiative and have also done very well by coming out with data on how Nigeria is performing with the extractive sector. And I'm happy that some level of cooperation is beginning to happen between NTA, EFCC, and ICPC in an attempt to also curb the corruption in the extractive sector. And then in overall, in trying to alignment, trying to see that within the framework of the open government partnership, where you have the anti-corruption agency coming together to at least collaborate. First time in history, you will see that ICPC, EFCC, and the Ministry of Justice are now coordinating their effort in tackling corruption in the country. For me, that is a huge plus, because within the framework of the open government partnership, one of the expectations was that let's see how the anti-corruption agency can begin to work together. And if that happens, it will help again strengthen the efficiency and ensure collective actions around major corruption issues. So those are the things that I think, this administration will need to focus on to see how the anti-corruption agency can also strengthen their collaboration and deepening their engagement. A while ago, you heard that EFCC again has raised the bar by prosecuting almost over 2,000 cases. For me, that again is a huge plus. What we need to begin to see, and that's the new thinking that I think Nigerians need to be focusing on, is the issue of ensuring that it's not just putting people in the prison, but it's also retrieving the asset back. But more importantly, that Nigerians need to take interest in is that over trillions of naira asset has been seized in the country. And it happens to be in that committee that the federal government has set up, the Interministerial Committee on Asset Recovery, on asset sales in the country. Now, the government need to come up with a real architecture that will help Nigerians to benefit from the work that EFCC and ICP is doing. You know, after this anti-corruption agency have taken the effort to recover assets, allowing those assets to just waste across the country is unacceptable, particularly when the country is looking for resources to finance the budget. I wonder why the country goes borrowing money, and we have assets we could have just put to sale that could provide resources to finance the budget of the country. It doesn't make any sense. We have a lot of assets across the country. In my experience in participating in the Interministerial Committee, moving across the country, what I see, I shed tears. Why would that happen? You have ships that were seized from criminals. They are all in the sea. You have houses seized from criminals. They are all wasting away across the country. Why will the federal government not make laws that will make it more transparent, more swift for such assets to be put to sale, and the resources is put to a proper budgeting processing that will benefit Nigeria? And in that way, it helps again encourage and deepening the fight of fighting corruption. Because
all right. Thank you very much, the Reverend David Ugolo, for the many important points that you have raised. One of those key points will go back to the chairman of the EFCC, Abdulrashid Power, to respond to those issues or also make his own contribution. One of the touchy issues in the past had to do with the management of recovered assets. And the point that Ugolo has made is one that I think that you should also respond to. At some point, there was confusion as to who was holding what. EFCC had its own authority, if you like, over recovered assets, the police, ICPC, and a number of other agencies. We heard that, okay, there was a committee that was working together to ensure that they all came under one roof, but if these are wasting assets or assets that could immediately be realized and increase the coffers of the Federation, why is it that we appear not to be dealing with the assets in a manner that will be ultimately beneficial to us?
You want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much again for the question. Reverend David have raised quite a number of issues. I was enjoying his presentation. At a time, I was thinking whether he was reading a speech, but I realized that, the David that I know, naturally, he knows some of these things offhand, and he's making his comment regarding that. Anyway, let me start by saying that there was no confusion regarding who has recovered what, who has what, etc., etc. The problem has been identified by the government. The government has made effort to now set up a committee to ensure that these assets are being disposed of for the utilization of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So I think, having understood the problem, having set up the committee is expected to be given some time to enable it to round up its work so that the funds realized can be utilized by the government. But then, these are not assets that were recovered last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. These are assets that have been recovered a very long time ago. Some of them have to be like that without being disposed because some of them are still under interim for future over the time. Some of them are under final for future, but maybe because of one reason or another, penal institutions like ours did not, do what we have to do by disposing them of. But one thing that is very clear, the assets are there and government is working towards disposing them of. And here at the EFCC, what we have resolved to do is that going forward, we are going to be dealing with these issues of disposal of assets having been forfeited to the federal government on case-by-case basis. There is no reason why an order will be given, let's say on Monday, for the asset to be forfeited, to the federal government. The processes and procedures are very clear as far as the EFCC Establishment Act is concerned. Those assets are expected to be disposed and the funds are expected to be deposited into the consolidated revenue funds. That is for the assets that belongs to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So we're going to be dealing with these issues on case-by-case basis. In fact, we have even started. Now, people are looking at this issue of assets as per the houses that they have, that they are seeing, or vessels on the high sea, etc., etc. There is more to it. It can be a phone, it can be a laptop, it can even be, counterfeit checks that are expected to be destroyed, etc., etc. So a phone that you will, recover from a cyber crime can be forfeited to the government, and then you have to dispose it of, and then of course, remit the funds, even if it is 10 naira or 20 naira. But I think, since when I came on board, we have analyzed these things. Yes, there are assets that that committee is looking at. There are even assets that we have recovered, within the period when the committee was set up and now. And we are putting in all our energies into seeing that we have cleared all the backlog. And then, of course, we are looking forward. What is important is that I think for now is that the problem has been identified, solution has been provided, and of course, the new management has taken the bold step of dealing with these issues on case by case basis until some of these things are being cleared.
Okay, thank you. Let's return to Mrs. Azuka Ogugwa in the same line of collaboration that Reverend Ugolo mentioned. To what extent is ICPC collaborating with EFCC? And with respect to what the chairman has just said on assets, that are recovered, sales and all of that, with respect to ICPC, how do you manage our assets that are recovered in terms of funds or property and what have you? Is it the same committee that is responsible for that?
Yes, it's an interagency committee, so it's not just one committee. But just like the EFCC chairman said, we treat the recovery on a case-by-case basis. There's a recovery account with CBN, so where assets are cash, they are sent back to the account. It's not warehoused with the commission at all. It's just sent back there to be kept. But when it comes to properties, now it depends on what assets and how you recover the assets. We recover assets when we go, for instance, on constituency and the executive projects tracking exercises. And when we do recover the assets, our objective is to return the assets to the community that should have benefited, that assets should have benefited. And that is what exactly we go on to do. So it depends on where the source of the assets. And like he mentioned, when you get interim forfeiture, you can't dispose of the assets. You need to now see the case to court. And if it takes you years, months to do that, you can't dispose of an asset that has not been released to you. There was this situation where I'm going into untested waters here, but I'll dare it. The Proceeds of Crime Act bill was being brought up, and the idea behind that was to find a way of managing the assets, even up to finding an organization to manage the assets. But we found some gaps and loopholes within the bill as proposed, and that was why it was not passed. But actually, we do need, as a country, to have a definitive statement and definitive procedures to handle assets that are recovered so that they don't waste, they don't depreciate to the extent that nobody can use them, and they are still, like if it is a school or a hotel or a building, it can still be made use of, put to use, so that some monies will be. That is the same thing that Nigeria is asking from other countries. That if we find that money has been laundered from this country, taken outside, that those countries should place our money in an escrow account to be yielding interest. So that when it is released, you will not just return maybe $1 million was taken away, $1 million was taken away. You will not just return $1 million to us. You will return it with interest. So in the same way, locally, assets that are seized, recovered, or whatever should be put to use. But that is a process that is ongoing, and I believe we will get there.
Well, thank you very much, Azuka, for the points that you have raised. But I was just wondering, because on Good Morning Nigeria some years ago, we had the conversation around anti-corruption, as we do from time to time. And we were told that poker, if it came into existence, would be a game changer. Poker, that's referring to the Proceeds of Crime Act. And we're supposed to have borrowed heavily from the similar legislation in the UK and in other jurisdictions, I think Malaysia and Singapore and others. But nothing appears to have been heard lately about poker or what proper framework or mechanism is being used for the management of the assets, the points that you have just indicated. I'm wondering, in terms of numbers, if you have interagency cooperation and collaboration, what value of recoveries have we had, say, in the last 5 years? Because at some point, when it has been said, we are told that Nigeria bleeds to the tune of several billions of dollars in terms of outflows of corruption. So what have we recovered in 5 years? Do we have the value? And is that value static, or we're already seeing depreciation?
Well, I don't understand whether you're talking about recoveries from within or from without, outside the country.
Both.
Both. Okay. Now, I can't say an exact figure, but I can tell you that it's not up to 10% of what has gone out. The values of what is recovered is much, much, much less than what has been recovered. And when it is recovered, it is like with some conditionalities, because they don't give you, like the Abuja funds that have been mentioned here, they don't give it to you just like that. You are told to spend it on so and so. So the poker, well, the issues around it were the powers it took away from the agencies. So I think there is still a work in progress to fine-tune it, to make it acceptable to all, because you can't be stopping something and be making something worse. On the other hand, you have to balance everything. Then the value of the assets, those that are recovered, like I mentioned, conditionalities to get them from the foreign countries. That's why right now the common African position on asset recovery speaks to the foreign countries not giving us such stringent conditionalities. Since they don't have such stringent conditionalities for accepting the assets in the first instance, that had to happen because you allow funds to flow out of a country into your country without too much examinations, without looking at it. They can just bring it, and then when it's time to return it, you start giving that same country that is claiming that these are their funds, you start giving them conditions under which you return it to them, that they must make sure it is ours.
Yeah, that's understandable, but what about recoveries within jurisdiction? That is to say, recoveries made within the country on account of the orders of a court directing final forfeiture. We hear of seizures and all kinds of claims, other than perhaps the Desiani issue. You don't hear of too many other instances of properties that have been recovered or put on the block for sale, so that the process go into the treasury.
They are there. There are a few instances I can't, like I said, I can't quote them, but they are there. Because once there is a final forfeiture, it is final. And so the legal process takes place for these to be sold off and the funds returned to the treasury. That does happen. It's not, that's another area where we have maybe we don't publicize it as much, but that does happen once we get final forfeiture. Usually when we do this, we even advertise it, we send releases out, we have final forfeiture of this asset. But the process of recovering the value of the assets and returning it, it's a technical, it's an administrative process. So if it's not newsworthy, Nigerians don't want to hear about it. All they want to hear is that finally these assets are being forfeited.
And some time ago, auctioneers were complaining that they were not being involved in the auction. That's because that's the auction law normally will require professional auctioneers to be engaged.
All right, let's bring in Reverend Ugolo, to us to speak in this direction. We're talking about a process of recovery and the value of what is recovered. Just as Azuka rightly said, that foreign countries would allow funds to flow into the country without a proper examination as to the source of such funds. When it comes to the time of recovering the funds, they begin to, give you conditionalities that will enable them, send back the the proceeds. Now, what would be your thought, with respect to how the graft agencies will deal with that kind of situation? I also like you to speak to the issue of how recovered, properties are handled, within this jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you very much. First, again, just our big brother, just to let him know that the auctioneers, that's not true. I am the chairman of the committee in the interministerial committee dealing with the disposal of assets in the country. In all the processes we have carried out that far, the auctioneers were carried along. And I challenge any auctioneer in the country. Over my 30 years working on anti-corruption work in the country, I can stick it out to say that no auctioneer was denied the access not to participate in the entire process. So that's not true. Auctioneers were carried along. And as we speak now, after the auctioneers have assisted in the independent evaluation processes, the Ministry of Works is now being saddled with the responsibility to oversight that process before the committee will proceed. So processes, the problem in Nigeria is that when people don't have their way, they want to try to throw wrong messages, and that's not very good. And then just to also put clear that what we really need in this country, and I think that is what we all need, EFCC, ICPC, all stakeholders, and the president of the country need to come together if we're going to be taken seriously in moving the anti-corruption war forward in the country. The asset recovery architecture need to be strengthened, and the only way to do that, and which number of institutions have recommended to Nigeria, is to put in place a proceeds of crime bill that will define the framework of asset management. Until that is done, this whole accusation and lack of transparency will continue, and it was again reduce our ability to be able to gain the cooperation of other international community people. Then the issue of conditionality around recovering. You see, some of us condemn conditionality, but there are appropriate framework you must all agree with, because the political will to drive the recovery requires some support from the country you are getting the money from, and what you want to put the money into. If you compare the utilization of the Abuja 1 and the Abuja 2 and then the Abuja 3, you will see a difference. If you don't put in a framework that guarantees transparency and accountability, the potential benefit of the recovery will be reduced. And then in absence of a transparent framework on how return fund will be used, it could lead to all kind of messaging that could damage the repatriation process. So my take is that, first, this government have done very well by putting in place the interministerial committee as an ad hoc process, but in the long term, and I think this is what President Buhari have to do, he has to take the responsibility as the president of the country. And beyond that, he has become the face of anti-corruption work in the entire continent. And he has to show example. And the only better way to show example is to put institutions that will help strengthen the fight against corruption in the country. And proceeds of crime bill is that framework that will help. Unfortunately, without that political will from the presidency, nothing will happen. EFCC, ICPC can only be strengthened when you put in this framework in place. What we are seeing today, if you look at the international community database, over $20 to $40 billion annually leaves developing countries to countries where safe haven. But the amount of resources that is recovered is very low. And the reason is that there is weak institutions. The capacity for developing country to embark on recovering is very weak. And even when the fuel is recovered, and Nigeria is one good example that has recovered very, very well, and this is as a result of the great work that EFCC and other anti-corruption agencies are doing in collaboration with the Ministry of Justice. But how do we strengthen this and make it look beyond individual? Like, you know, the only way to tackle corruption in a more sustainable way is to put in the right institution. Like Kingsley rightly noted, the issue of poker is very important, and the only way to define it is for the presidency to take the leadership. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. And if you ask me to assess this government on that area, I will score them very low on that. And that has actually been one of the key reasons why Nigeria has not been doing well in other external evaluation. So how do we move forward to ensure that we can take the advantage of the recent key role that EFCC and ICP has been playing on the anti-corruption fight? Is to help them address this kind of area where they can be strengthened to take this anti-corruption forward. And then to finally also look into where are we with the fund recovered so far. If you look at Abuja 3, for example, which was recovered for, now the use was going to be used for building the second bridge, the Kano Abuja road, the Ibadan Lagos road. Now, Nigerians need an update. Nigerians want to know how you are spending those money. Now, you see, the government shouldn't wait until when there is scandal. The government shouldn't wait when there is media scandal. They should be proactive. So I would like to appeal to the Nigerian government to put in place a communication strategy that will continue to inform Nigeria what all the recoveries that we are making. Then you look into the internal recovery, all the domestic recovery that AICPC have recovered so far. Where are they going? If you say they are put into dedicated fund in the central bank, yes, when it gets to the central bank, it moves into the national budget. Now, Nigerians need to know, if it moves from central bank to the national budget, which project is it financing? Then that brings me into the contestation of having a comprehensive policy that exists between the federal government and the state government and the local government. So that every recovery that is recovered, there is a law that will guide how that recovery goes to the victim of the corruption. Take the instance between Delta State and the Nigerian government when Ibori loot was recovered. Now, the contestation that happened was that when that money was recovered, during the prosecution of Governor Ibori in London, the prosecution process, take note that Ibori was a governor of Delta State, and that the money that lay claim to came from Delta State. But when the recovery came back to Nigeria, what happened? What happened? So this kind of thing send a wrong signal to the international community, and it's not good for the reputation of the country at all.
All right. The Reverend Ugolo, thank you very much. We're, of course, discussing aspects relating to funds that flow out of the country, but there are also, Kirian, funds that are retained within the country. You have all kinds of structures in different parts of the country with markings on them, usually EFCC, keep off. Under investigation, ICPC, keep off, under investigation. Of course, those cases are still being prosecuted. And just before we take the short break, I wanted to point out to the Reverend David Ugolo about the role of auctioneers. There is a story that was published online by the Guardian newspaper in May 2019. Auctioneers seek quick disposal of recovered national assets, and he was quoting the national president of the Nigeria Association of Auctioneers, Alhaji Aliyu Kiliya. He was making the same point that you're talking about now in terms of quickly disposing of national assets. But he, in that statement, drew attention to e-auction that is likened to secret bids. And that is also pointing to the exclusion of auctioneers. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
All right, you're welcome back to the program, and let's return to the EFCC chairman. Mr. Chairman, high-profile individuals have been prosecuted by your agency. This includes judges, politicians, military officers, retired and serving, and you were applauded. The EFCC was applauded because of that. But also the fact that some cases have been stalled, either in court or delayed, as the case may be. There are instances where former governors, even those who were in power in previous administrations, who some of them are now at the National Assembly, we don't tend to hear about the prosecution which was started by EFCC in the past. So let us into that. And you appear to be losing some cases, some high-profile cases as well. Is it as a result of lack of, diligent approach to the system of litigation and what have you? So let us know how you have fared, in terms of litigations and getting those who are prosecuted to be judged by the appropriate court of competent jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you very much. But before I answer your question, I just want to comment on my elder brother's last presentation, Reverend David. One, on the issue of poker. The government have understood that, yes, we need to have a sort of a legislative framework around that. And all stakeholders have agreed to that. And an executive bill was sent to the National Assembly. I'm also aware that there are quite about 2 or 3 other bills sponsored by members of the National Assembly. So, and I think the government have done its bit. Now we are at the National Assembly. The National Assembly are also doing their bit. Making a law is not an easy task. It's not a one-day thing. It's not a 2-day thing. It's not a 1-month thing. And of course, because it's a serious business, they have to take their time to ensure that what we have at the end of the day is what we desire to have. So pressure from international community, pressure from this, pressure from that, should not deter us, our legislators and the executive, to have something that will, last the test of time. So I think the Nigerian government as a whole, either from legislative perspective or from, executive perspective, is addressing these issues of process of crime. Yes, of course, stakeholders have made their various presentations. These were engaging with the legislators, etc., etc. But I think our buy-in, or what we think that should be looked at in the more serious note, is the idea of creating an agency to manage this. And I think we should have a legal framework whereby all agencies that has something to do with issues of asset recovery can look at that law and make use of it as it affects their own mandate. Just like the Money Laundering Prohibition Act. You don't have a single agency that is doing that per se, to say that, okay, for whatever thing that you are doing, bring it to this agency. Customs is making utilization of that law. CBN is making utilization of that law. Central Bank is making utilization of that law. EFCC, as well as NFIU, etc., etc. And that is the kind of, legal framework we are expecting from, anything that has to do with process of crime. I think I will leave it at that. The second issue that I want to make comment about is the fact that my brother mentioned that there is this ambiguity regarding who gets what, where, and how, and he cited the problem of Delta State and the federal government. I think there is no ambiguity there. Before you even talk about issues of asset recovery and repatriation or restituting a victim, of course you know who the victim is. Even during the course of your investigation, you should know the victim, the interviews you are conducting, where the monies came from, where the monies went to. You should know the victim. And then upon recovery, you are expected to return such process of crime to the victim of that crime, whether it is an individual, it's a corporate entity, it's a state government, or it's a federal government. And that is what every penal institution like ours is doing. ICPC is doing that. EFCC is also doing that. So also is the Nigeria police. Now, in this instant case, in every case, you can have similar cases, but they cannot be the same. They cannot be exact. We have in this case the then Delta State government, went to court after the Attorney General, I think, have sworn to an affidavit to say that, look, there is nothing that is lost here in Delta State. We have not lost any money. It does not belong to us. So if it does not belong to you, that means it belongs to the Federation of Nigeria. And that was happened. That's what was happened. That is what it is. So there is no ambiguity there between who a victim of crime is and who should be restituted upon the recovery of such funds. Now, coming back to your question, regarding this issue of high-profile case, at any point before judgment, there is that presumption of innocence. You are innocent until you are proven guilty. So you can be under prosecution, of course, you are innocent until the court has pronounced that you are guilty of that crime that you are being prosecuted on. So, of course, we have a lot of people that are under, prosecution that are contesting for elective positions. We have some that are also elected on the platform. So be it. We should respect the law. That is the law of the country. That is what it's supposed to be, and that is how it's supposed to be, and that is what we need to know and hope that time and time again our laws are being improved, and then we are getting there day by day. We are working tirelessly on that. The cases are enormous. You are aware that we have quite a number of former governors, because that is what you ask, that are still under prosecution. Prosecutions are ongoing. We will not be able to make individual comments regarding what is the problem here, what is the problem there, etc. We are a respecter of law. We respect the judiciary. We have a very, 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 cordial relationship with the judiciary, and that is what translated into the success that the EFCC recorded last year. Last year, you are all aware that we recorded 2,220 convictions within one calendar year. It is an unprecedented, figure that we have reached last year. The closest to it was in 2019, when the Commission recorded 1,280. And I think if you look at some of the graphs that we inform Nigerians about what we do, you can see that the success rate of the cases that we have, successfully prosecuted vis-a-vis those that we have lost. Because out of this combined, we concluded 2,257. We lost only 37. And that translated to only 1.54%, if I'm correct. So that means we have success rate of close to 99% in court. We're working tirelessly on that. Are we there yet? Are there gaps? Yes, there are gaps. Are we identifying the gaps? Yes, we're identifying the gaps. Are we looking towards, solving them? Of course, we're talking. Some of them require some legislative amendments. Some of them require some administrative amendments. Some of them are just, pure enforcement issues. And we are determined to ensure that, justice is served and justice is gotten at the end of the day. We have been, accused of so many things that, yes, we are not doing this in terms of high-profile cases, politically exposed cases, etc., etc. These are not cases that you can conclude within 1 year, within 2 years. You are mentioning somebody that was a former governor who is now a senator. We prosecuted him for 12 years. For 12 good years, he was convicted. The Supreme Court, said that, of course, since the judge has been elevated to the Court of Appeal, doesn't have, and of course, we have to go back to the High Court. And we're in High Court now, and we pursue whatever thing that is happening out there until the people of the state and Nigerians at large have gotten justice for what was done to them. So,
Chairman, Chairman Bauer, very quickly, because we're getting pressed for time. Now, a perennial view in some quarters is that the anti-corruption agencies, including the EFCC, are sometimes used as instruments for political witch hunt. Now, this is the election season, that 2022 leading up to 2023. are we likely to see a validation of this viewpoint, or, of course, a negation of the viewpoint, as I said, that sometimes the EFCC and others get to be used for political witch hunt purposes?
Well, we're in a democracy. People are entitled to their perception. People are entitled to their opinion. People can say all that they have to say, regarding what government agency have done or this or that. They are entitled to their opinion. But from our own perspective, what we are seeing is that a crime has been committed and somebody has committed the crime. And there is linkage to that. And once that is done, and of course we are satisfied that, yes, this is what it is, of course, we go to court to ensure that justice is done. We can't just, determine on our tables that somebody is guilty or somebody is not guilty. We have to go to court. These are things that, yes, of course, the EFCC has been accused for. When a particular political party was leading this country, they say we are doing political witch hunt. Now another political party is leading the country. They are saying that EFCC is doing that. We will not be blackmailed into, holding back, in ensuring that we are achieving our mandate. We'll continue to do what we have to do. Everybody can say whatever he wants to say, but we are determined, we are focused, we know that what we are doing is right. At the right time, we are going to charge people to court. Very soon, we are going to charge people to court, and we are not unmindful of the fact that, people will come with that opinion, people will come with that perception. But that is not, the reality. The reality is that somebody has committed a crime, and then he has to, face justice to ensure that justice is done to Nigeria. It's as simple as that. Nobody can come in here to have a meeting with the EFCC chairman or the director of operations to say that, look, yes, we are coming to this, okay, help us to do this, do that, arrest this person, detain that person, charge this person to court. For what? We are a penal institution. We have sworn an oath, to ensure that only our mandate is being achieved. And this is how it's supposed to be done. And this is what it is. We are professionals in what we are doing. So for goodness sake, people can have their perception, people can have their opinion. But Nigerians should learn to trust their leaders, should learn to trust those in public office, and should learn to respect decisions that they are taking. To take a decision of this magnitude is not something that, it just happens. So many things are before you, but somebody will just be privy to one particular information, and then he will now amplify it to make it as if that is what it is, despite the fact that he does not have the global picture, he doesn't have the bigger picture of what it is before that decision is being arrived at. So I think, generally what we are doing is for the betterment of this country, is for the betterment of Nigeria. We'll continue to do what we have to do. People can say all sorts of things, and that is the beauty of democracy. But the bottom line is, when you are charged to court, have you committed those allegations that you are being charged for? Is there a prima facie case against you? Are there facts to prove those things? And if there are not, you have the opportunity to also defend yourself.
All right, Chairman, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Abdul Rashid Bauer, we'd like to thank you for sharing your time with us, and of course, letting Nigerians know what it is that the EFCC has been doing. We thank you for being here this morning, and we hope to see you again on this platform when we re-invite you for another session of this conversation. Thank you indeed, and have a great day working. All right, and I would also like to appreciate Mrs. Azuka Ogugwa. Mrs. Azuka Ogugwa is the spokesperson, Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, and Deputy Director, Public Enlightenment and Education Department. Thank you also for being here. Professor Sadiq Rada, we lost him on the line a short while ago, Executive Director, Executive Secretary, Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC. We also like to thank Reverend David Ugolo, Executive Director of the African Network for Environment and Economic Justice. Thank you for your